Good morning, third graders. It's Monday, January 11th. It's going to be a great day. It's a little cold outside, but we're going to get our hot cocoa and we're going to get ready to do some math problems. So let's get started. We have week 16, day 1. So make sure you have your DMA before you watch your solutions video. Remember, if you get it correct, you're going to put a star here. If you had to correct it, you're going to put an SC here so that you can see that you had to make some corrections in your thinking. So let's take a look at our first problem for today. It says draw 16 stars, put them equally into 2 sets. Now when they say sets, they're talking about groups, right? And how many stars are going to be in each group or each set? So in this case, we know that we're going to have 2 groups, and we are going to take the 16 stars and share them equally between those 2 groups. So our division equation starts with 16 stars. We're going to have and share them equally between 2 groups, and we're looking for the number of stars in each group. So we're going to start with 1, 2, and actually, since this is an even number, I could even put them as 2s. So let's maybe do that first. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, oops, I didn't make my groups, 14, and finally 16. So you will notice, let me extend my group here, you will notice that I have a 6 and 2, so that's 8 in each group. So I have 16 stars, I divided them or shared them equally between the 2 groups, and there are 8 stars in each group. So you'll also notice that this is a model, or this looks very similar to multiplication. And you would be correct. And in fact, that's what our lesson today is going to be on. It's making sure that we understand that division is an unknown of our multiplication. So when we started this, we knew that we had 2 groups. However, we did not know how many objects were in each group, but we did know that there were 16 as a total. So in this case, we know that there's 8 and 8, and 8 plus 8 makes our 16, or 2 groups of 8 is going to give us 16. So this is how division and multiplication are related to each other. Not equal to each other, but related, okay? So we'll talk about that a little bit more during our lesson. Next problem asks us to round each number to the nearest 10. So I'm going to underline the tens place here. And remember, your 400 is still here. We're just using the tens place to round to the closest closest 10. Now remember, we talked about when we started rounding that the closer or the smaller the place value is that you're rounding, the more accurate the exact amount it's going to be. We're looking for the difference here. Everybody say difference. Difference is the answer to a subtraction problem, which means I want to know how much it is from 315 to get to 497. Well, if you think about it, it's at least 100, because if I add 100 to 315, that'd be 415. And so then another 80, right? 100. So we're getting pretty close to the idea of what our difference is going to be from 315 up to 497. Now, first we have to round our numbers. So if you remember, we have our chart, and it's our multiples of 10 chart. So if I look for the number 497, and I know that 497 is going to be right here, these are all the multiples of 10 between 400 and 500. Well, I know 497 is between 490 and 500. Remember, between each group of 10 is 5. So we use 495 to decide, are we going to round up or are we going to round down? Now, if it's less than 495, we round down. If it's 495 or greater, we're going to round up to 500. Now, some of you might say, oh, well, 500 is also a 10 too? Yes, when we're counting by multiples of 10, when we reach these 100 marks, these are also a group or a multiple of 10. So 490, or we're going to round it to 500. So let's take a look at our number, 497. So remember, we just said that 495 is the number we're going to take and the ones place. If it's less than 5, we round down. If it's greater than 5, we round up. Now, since this is greater than 495, we're going to round up to 500. Now, we're subtracting because that is our operation symbol. That's what we're doing with the numbers. So we're going to now look at 300 where 315 is. Now, if we look at the tens place, we see 310. And we know 310 is going to be, or 315 is going to be here between these two tens. 310 and 320. Now, 315 happens to be right in the middle of these two tens. Now remember, when we use the ones place, which is 5, we know that since it's right in the middle, it's 5 away from 310, but it's also 5 away from 320. So our rule is, when it's right in the middle of the two tens, we have the rule that we're going to round up. We're going to go up. Okay? So 320, we're rounding that up. Now, we can subtract. So subtract 500, and I'm just going to subtract off 300, and that leaves me with 200. And if I take this 200 and subtract off 20 more to make that 320, I'm going to subtract 10, which would be 190, and 10 more, which would be 180. So the difference between 500 and 320 is 180. That is our difference. Remember that vocabulary word, difference. Now, to check this, I would use addition to see with 180 plus 320 give me 500. We check using addition. So if I were going to check my subtraction, 320 plus 180, well, 300 and 100 gives me 400, and 80 and 20 gives me another 100 that I'm regrouping, and that gives me 500. So we did our subtraction correctly. Nice job. So again, if you did this correctly, place a star here. If you didn't, please put an SC here and show that you had to self-correct yourself. And it's okay if you have to self-correct. Again, we're always learning. So let's take a look at our next set of problems. We have 30 groups of 8, or we could say 8 groups of 30. So if we had 30, and then another 30 would be 60, and another 30 would be 90, and another 30 would be, right, 120. 30 more would be 150, 180. Now, if you're thinking about threes, count by threes. It would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Now we're just counting by tens, groups of 10. So this would be 21. In this case, it'd be 210. And then finally, 210 plus another group of 30 would be 240. So just like counting by threes, counting by 30s follows that same pattern of 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, and 240. 240 is our product. Answer to a multiplication sentence is called the product. Okay, now we can use 6 groups of 40. 6 groups of 40. Remember, if we switch our factors, it does not matter. If we switch the factors, the product will be the same. So if I were going to add 40 groups of 6, it's still going to be the same amount as 6 groups of 40. So it's easier for us to add 6 groups of 40 than it is to add 40 groups of 6. So let's think about this. I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 80. Now we could also break this down as 3 groups of 40 and another 3 groups of 40 if we want to use the distributive property, our distributive thinking here. So 3 groups of 40, let's think about this. 3 groups of 40, that's 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. So 3 groups of 40 is 120. So if I have 3 groups of 40 equals 120, then another 3 groups of 40 is also going to equal 120. And 120 and 120, 100 and 100 is 200. 20 and 20 is 40, and I don't have any ones. So my product is going to be 240. Now, if you notice, we have the same product for both of these. So we could actually say that these are equivalent to each other since they have the same product. So I could actually even write that as 30 times 8 is the same as 40 times 6. That is a true statement because they both have the same product. They are both equal to one another. Now, let's take this next equation, and it's 9 groups of 30. Now, we just did 8 groups of 30 up here. So why not us use this 8 groups of 30, which was 240, and then use our understanding of the distributive property to add one more group of 30. So if I add one more group of 30, which makes 9 groups of 30 now, this 9 groups of 30 is made up of 8 groups and one more group of 30. Now I add 30 more onto 240. 30 plus 40, yes, correct, is 70. So now I have 270. Since I don't have any hundreds to add on here, that stays 200. So 270 is my product. And all I did was just add another group of 30 here, and I showed it by breaking it apart and using my distributive property to make that understanding. We have 10 objects, and we're putting them into either 2 groups, or if it would be easier for you, you can put it into groups of 2. Well, I'm going to try putting it into groups of 2 and then figuring out what the groups are. I'm going to model this in different ways. That way you can see that it's still going to give you the same product, or excuse me, the same quotient. It's just how you look at it a little differently. So I have 10 objects. I'm going to put them into groups of 2. So I'm going to start with 2. That's one group of 2. Another group of 2. Now I have 2 groups of 2. Another group of 2 is now 6. Another group of 2 is now 8. And another group of 2 is now 5 groups of 2. So now I can come over here to my quotient. I took my 10 objects, I put them into groups of 2, so I did the number in each group, and I find that I have 5 groups of 2. Now you'll notice, again, we're going to talk about this as our lesson for today, that this looks much like a multiplication example or diagram. Now we can use our understanding of multiplication to help us with division. So if I count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, I know that I have 5 groups of 2 to give me that 10 total. So I'm checking my division by using multiplication. The next problem here says we have 24 objects, pieces of bubble gum, and we're going to share them into groups of 3. Notice this time I'm deciding that these are going to be my groups now, which now tells me that I'm going to need to find the number in each group. Again, these are interchangeable. That means you can either put them into groups of 3 or you can divide it into 3 groups. So I'm deciding that I'm going to divide it into 3 equal groups. So now, instead of putting 3s, I can put 3 groups and start dividing them in equally. Now, again, this is an even number, so that tells me I can at least count by 2s this time. Again, 2, 4, 6, and I'm counting up to 24, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, and finally, all 24 pieces of gum have been put into 3 equal groups. Now, if you look, do we have the same number in each group? 4 and 4 makes 8. 4 and 4 makes 8. 4 and 4 makes 8. So this tells me that I have 8 in each group. So if I were going to say I have 24 pieces of bubble gum or pieces of gum, and I'm going to share it between my 3 friends, each person is going to get 8 pieces of gum. That would be a nice word problem to kind of demonstrate that thinking. Again, remind yourself that once I'm finished sharing, now this looks like a multiplication sentence. So again, that's what we're going to be focused on today is how do we relate division with multiplication. So I see that I have 3 groups here, and I'm just going to show this since I don't have much room. I have 3 groups with 8 pieces of gum in each group, and since I know 8 plus 8 is 16, plus 8 more is 24, then I know that I have done my division correctly by checking it using multiplication. And finally, I have 9 objects, and I'm putting it into, let's just say 1 group, because that seems like it might be fairly easy to do. So if I have 1 group, then I'm looking for my number in each group. And I'm just going to say that that's 9. There's no sense in me dividing it equally because I should know that 9 groups with 1, or excuse me, since I just said that that was a group here, this is my group, maybe I'll use the other way. So if I have 1 group of 9, which is going to match my model here, that's going to give me 9 as my total. So 1 group of 9 is the same as 9 groups of 1. So I could have taken this and put them into groups of 1. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and finally 1. So I could have done the number in each group, and I still would have had 9 groups. So again, remember, these are interchangeable. Your groups are going to be able to be exchanged or switched with the number in each group. Why is that true? Because when we switch these factors, they are also true. So I could say 9 groups of 1 is also equal to 9. That's this model here. 1 group of 9 is this model here. So hopefully our lesson today will be fairly simple in your understanding. We've done a lot of talking about how division is related to multiplication and how they're opposite of each other. So have a great Monday, guys, and don't forget to watch your lesson video before you do your assignment. Have a great day. It's Monday. Woo-hoo.